Hey, it's Barry.
Hey, it's Nate.
Hey, it's Brian.
And welcome back to the Collecti-Bros podcast. On today's episode, is it worth it? Fighting Fantasy. This is a long pause. Fighting Fantasy Warlock of Firetop Mountain for the Nintendo DS. How excited are you?
Me?
The silence.
Oh,
I'm excited. This is a game I've been curious about for a long time, so I chance to finally get to play it. I don't own it, so I'm pretty hyped.
no, for me, this was a perfect example of why I love doing this podcast, because I have never heard of this game, and
Yeah?
I've got some thoughts about this one. This was
Okay.
a great choice.
Well, before we get into it fully, if you like what you listen to by the end of this, check us out on social media. We're at Collecti-Bros Pod on all platforms. I would suggest joining the Discord. The link is in the show notes. With the downfall of TikTok here soon, we're not going to be on there. I'm just going to bet on it. So, if you want to talk to us, Discord's the best one. We're pretty active on there. Getting started, we'll talk about this game a little bit. It released in 2009 for Nintendo DS, developed by Big Blue Bubble. Big Blue Bubble is not really known for much, but it's one of Canada's loved companies, I guess, doing my research. They're most known for the game called My Singing Monsters, which is a mobile game, which I guess had a whole bunch of downloads. I've never played it or heard of it because I'm not a mobile gamer, but it looks like they had a hand in developing, I feel like, a lot of ports, like mobile ports for games. They're not really super credited on a lot of stuff as Big Blue Bubble, but this was their developed and published by Aspyr. There was an iOS version of this game that came out in 2010,
Interesting.
but Big Blue Bubble published the iOS version, and they lost the license in 2012. So the iOS versions were withdrawn.
Damn.
So
That's too bad.
this is the only way to play the game, other than emulation. It is also based on the game book called the same name, Fighting Fantasy Warlock of Firetop Mountain. And if you're familiar with tabletop games, this might be known to you, but it's the first book in the series that was released in 1982, and it spawned a 58-book series.
58, damn.
58 of them. It's a single-player adventure game book with 3 stats, just like the game. Skill, stamina, and luck. And it pretty much... the best way I can describe how this works is it's like a single-player... You read the book, there's a scenario, and depending on what happens in that scenario, it tells you what page to turn to, and then you'll go to that page to continue where you left off. So it's a multiple tabletop RPG, single player, 6-sided dice. I think a lot of people now are familiar with D20 style, and it was converted to a D20 style, I want to say in like 2008, 9, something like that. So there is a D20 rule version of it out, but it did create a big boom in the UK for tabletop game. Like, it is kind of a big deal. I know a lot of people probably haven't heard of this one in particular, but Fighting Fantasy is like a staple name in the community. It was created by Steven Jackson and Ian Livingston, who are co-founders of Game Workshop.
Nice.
So... and it was, here's a quote. It was included in 2007's Hobby Games The 100 Best by Chris Pramas, who said, it was a pioneering release that popularized solo gamebook and successfully brought the role-playing game experience to a wider audience. You have to think this is the 80s, so...
Yeah.
The book alone sold over 2 million copies, and it was only the first Fighting Fantasy of the series. The Warlock of Firetop Mountain spawned 58 more Fighting Fantasy books in the original series. Support magazine, a board game, Ambition spin-off series, several computer games, 2 traditional role-playing games, and a series of fantasy novels. Then there was the Legion of Imitators, another surge of success. A sign of success, not bad for a slim paperback less than 200 pages long. And this
Pretty
was
cool.
2007 before this game came out. So there was more stuff even after this. So the fighting fantasy as a whole is one of the big ones in Dungeons and Dragons community, basically. D&D is a whole brand in of itself. Everyone calls everything at this point Dungeons and Dragons in that style. People are most familiar with Dungeons and Dragons at Pathfinder now, but this one is like, you don't need a whole table of people to play this game. You don't need a game master. Like, the book is your game master.
That's pretty cool. And it's
So,
single player. That's
Just single player.
I'm not a huge tabletop game guy. I always appreciate it because it's pretty much what you had before video games, right? But I've never heard of a single player one. That's pretty cool. I'd be way more interested in that because I have you two are my only friends.
So that's kind of what this whole game is based off of. They were pretty close to what the story was, but considering it's not, there are like multiple ways you can play this game, multiple ways you can get to the ending, but it's a little bit more open than what the rule book or the game book would tell you to do. So they kind of did their best based on the game book, and then this is the game that we got. This game was not received well.
No, it was not.
It was not received well by critics. It is considered a pretty good game by users when we go off of the Metacritic criteria. Some of the things that have been said, Nintendo Power said it's no fun facing monsters that are suddenly too tough to kill. This game doesn't capture any of the magic inherent in Fighting Fantasy's formula, which is from 1UP. They just gave it a 16 out of 100.
Ooh.
GameSpot said abysmal controls and frustrating gameplay await you in the depths of Firetop Mountain. And then you've got user reviews who say hidden gem. It's the only RPG game on the DS that's a first person with nice graphics, remarkable masterpiece, far better than any Elder Scrolls game.
Whoa.
Whoa. Whoa.
That's a dev.
Okay,
That's a dev.
Whoa, okay.
So, let's see. 10s, 9s. This game's really underrated. It's a good example of how reviews don't always tell the whole story. So, it's kind of a decisive game. And that was a big reason on why I wanted to pick this. Because the score was so low, but the user score was so high in comparison. I mean, you're talking, in total on Metacritic, your Metascore is a 45. But your user score is a 7.8. That's like quite a large margin, and I don't really consider myself to be a contingent like follower of reviews. If I see a 40, I'm not going to assume the game is bad, and if I see an 8, I'm not going to assume the game is good, because everyone's tastes are so different. Like, there's 10 out of 10 games that I love that people think are dog shit, and then there's other ones that I'm just like, why would you ever say that's a perfect masterpiece? Days Gone.
I'm about to say that's two in a row. This is 2 games in a row where the Metacritic was a deciding factor into us
So,
playing it.
like, for me personally, I picked this game because of the vast difference of them, and I wanted to see why. So, I think I was pleasantly surprised when I came out of it, so we'll see what you guys have to say about it.
This game got reviewed because of the difficulty factor, and people couldn't get past that. I think if you actually sit here and work at it, there's a lot of merit to what the user reviews are saying. Like most Metacritic scores, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but it's why you should all play your games. Just collect them.
I think that's
I mean, there's
fair.
some higher ones on here from the critic reviews. It was mixed. It's mostly mixed and negative on here. Like, one of them says fans of Darkspire and other old school dungeon crawlers will find solace, but most gamers will likely quit a few hours in, which I think is true. And there's a lot of forums I read on there where it was like, why do people don't like this game? And a lot of it is because the level of patience you need with this, and some people just don't have it. So there's some pros and cons to this, which we'll get into, but I think ultimately it was reviewed poorly simply for the difficulty scale. So the story is pretty simple. Let me pull up the game book first.
I didn't have a lot of story notes.
There's not,
There's not. So the plot of the DS game is, and I'm going to read it. Actually, I'm going to read exactly what it says off the back of the box. which is pretty much the whole story.
Probably best, yeah.
An ancient dwarven keep at Firetop Mountain has been held by the sinister warlock Zagor for decades. Many have tried to plunder the fabled riches hidden deep within the mountain, and none have returned. Only the evil scourge of the warlock and his minions stand in the way of your prize. That's it. You basically are going on a quest to find a treasure of a warlock that's hidden inside of a mountain. And you have to traverse the mountain like a dungeon. Solve some puzzles. Fight some stuff.
I want to say really quick, shout out to the devs for trying to translate a choose your own adventure book pretty much into a full-fledged story. You know, that'd be difficult because most other games it's like, here's a script you follow. But if this is based off a tabletop game where it's like you have to make a decision, then flip to a page, that would be difficult to translate into a video game.
Yeah, I feel like maybe they took what they thought was the best route to convert it to a game that's still kind of linear, but it's hard to say like what the true path would have been. I mean, overall, the story of this is you're going in the mountain to get the warlock's treasure.
Yeah.
There's not really an explanation of like your character's like motivations for finding the money. I mean, it's a very self-insert story, and that's how the book was intended to be. Is it's like you are the single player and this is what your goal is, and there's not really like a tie-in of your character, why they're trying to find this money, or a backstory. Is, you know, like a lot of times when we talk about tabletop games now, especially with ones that are ran by, you know, DMs or GMs, they do those session zeros where every player is like, here's my character, here's my backstory, here's what I want done, and they'll tie that into the story. And it's a little difficult to do in a single player game book. That's just like, here's the book, here's the order that you go in, and then if this happens, that happens. If this happens, that happens. And there's no person that's running the game that can take those liberties, that says, oh, okay, your character came from a village where, you know, every fucking adventurer's backstory is they're an orphan, I guess, which is the most common. So that we can say that, like, oh, you know, maybe your character's parents were killed by orcs from the mountain, and like part of the treasure hoard is like a family heirloom or something. Like, there's nothing that a game master can do to change that story to make it more personal. So it is kind of a flash story.
Yeah. This game's very much like a time capsule, though. It's like you're thinking if this is something based off 80s high fantasy. There wasn't like a whole lot, like, it's not Baldur's Gate 3, y'all. Like,
no.
You know what I mean? The game is very simple. It's like the best. We gotta remember it's on a DS for one, so you're not expecting some elaborate scheme here, but this is like the equivalent of a DOS game.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's very much a traditional RPG, which is a role-playing game where, like Barry said, you do have to insert yourself into it. Like, even like the character creating, that's kind of like the only story you get. It does ask you a series of questions, and you base your character off that, or you could do the advanced route and just kind of pick. But yeah, it's very much a self-insert story. It's a very traditional RPG where you are basically creating the character and the backstory in your head. And yeah, you've got to use a lot of imagination. But for a pen and paper book, that makes a ton of sense.
I will say there is like a bit of, for it being so, because the game takes place entirely in this keep, basically, except for the very beginnings, like outside of the keep. Like, they do try to make the world living as best they can, because there's characters you can talk to and interact with while you're exploring the keep, and they talk about their struggles in it and like what they deal with. Like, the first people you run to aren't trying to kill you. They're like dwarves that are kind of like chilling on the outside, and they're kind of like, oh, we try to stay out of the keep's like craziness. And there's other people that are living like, you know, knees deep into shit in there. They're like, yeah, I have to fend off skeletons, and I'm just trying to find my mining gear. So they try to make it lived in as much as possible, but obviously it's extremely limited being on a DS. But I did find the world, like, kind of wanted to know more about the keep and stuff as I was playing it, even though it wasn't like a huge integral part of the story. They did it the best they could with like making it feel lived in, if that makes sense. I specifically remember there's an encounter with, like, when you're in this like water area, and there's like a skeleton who's like, hey, go clear out this like path of dwarves for me. And you're kind of like, they're living people, they're not like possessed or anything. Are you out of like the killing business? The skeleton's like, you got to get with the times, man. Like, it have to change. So you go and like kill them all for him. And I was like, no, I can open my, you know, trading on a boat. And it was like, what the hell? It's so random, but it's one little character. They try to give them like living in the actual world. So they did what they could with making it feel like a living place, you know. So it's the main plot is pretty bare bones, but they did add little things to try to give it some life.
Yeah, I think I read an interview where they basically said that if you've never played the game book, there's nothing that's going to stop you from understanding the story, but people who have will recognize some of the characters that come up and cross story. But I think the sentiment is kind of across the board. Like, here's another review from, like, a re-review from 2010. And this person for the storyline basically said, Destination Geek, Neil Thompson from BoardGameGeek.com, and says, it also must be said that the story is also fairly cliched, as the find, the fame, and the fortune line is as old as time. That being said, it gets away with it pretty well, as it is the first in the series, and this form of gaming is basically cutting edge in 1982. It's also should be remembered the fantasy theme had not been done to death back in 82 as it is today. So, that's like, when they said it is a time capsule, it's like kind of hard because we have so many expectations for a fantasy story now. It's like, oh, what about me? What about my character? There's not really so much you can do.
Yeah.
Basically, this format was, like I said, cutting edge technology back in 1982. And then even then, like, in the 90s, they actually started to see a dip in sales for the series because of computer games. So they had to compete with, it's like, okay, why do I want to buy a game book when there's a computer game too? And they were going to end it, I think, at the 50th book, which is the direct sequel to this.
Interesting.
So everything between 1 and 50 are just like spin-offs or individual stories or everything within like the Finding Fantasy universe, but the 50th one was supposed to be the sequel to the first, and it was supposed to end there because sales weren't that great. But then all of a sudden sales started going up again, so they printed more, they sold to Wizard, and then Wizard started printing new stories. So Wizard publishes it now.
Interesting.
And then they've done reprints, they've done PDF, D20 alterations for it, so I think I went to the Fighting Fantasy website, and I think there was a 40th anniversary event or something like that. Maybe there was something this year. I can't remember. 82 would have been 2 years ago, but it's still relevant, especially in the UK. It's still relevant, and considering it was created by two people who founded Games Workshop, which is a big deal. Yeah, you might have heard of Games Workshop if you're in the community. So,
as far as the story, it's not something I'm going to knock it for because, like I said, it is very much a product of its time and stuff. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I wish they would have expanded this or that. I think they did a good job with what they had, and it's not something I'm going to sit there and be like, the story was bad. I'm not going to sit here and rave about it either.
No.
I don't think we can fault a handheld dungeon crawler based in very early fantasy for not having like some gut-wrenching story.
It also feels like that they had the book and they said, we want to make this book into a DS and we don't want to take personal liberties with it, which they didn't.
So I respect the hell of them for that. Yeah,
same. That's, like I said earlier, it's got to be super difficult. I'm glad that wasn't my job, quite frankly.
So overall, I feel like what they intended was executed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
That's enough.
But I don't ever see anybody knocking it for story. When we're talking about people's general opinion about this game, I don't ever see really story coming up, because I think the general consensus of when people play this game is like, we understand what the story is, we're here to play it. So
I will say, I agree with Nate's point too, talking about the world building a little bit. It's not this elaborate thing where you're finding codexes like Mass Effect or you're reading books like Elder Scrolls, but the dialogue, it's spoken in a humorous way at times, where it's like the humor is kind of like British humor, tongue in cheek. And I had a couple times where I was literally, after an epic battle, used to start chuckling because the humor is so off the wall and just out there. So it's fun. It's got its own flavor, and I appreciate that too.
It very much has that like DOS dungeon crawler feel to it, where like the games were kind of cheeky. Like it definitely had to like harken some memories back for me.
Yeah, I think overall this game, it feels like playing early computer games with you, Nate, and it brought back a lot of memories. Even the story, probably the least of it, honestly, but it's vital to that as well. But this is like one of those games, like if I had this as a kid, dude, I would have been on cloud 9, because this is like everything I wanted as a young kid. Portable RPG on the go, first person with like real time combat. Like, this game was made for me, and it sucks this is the first time I've ever heard of it or played it, but yeah, I'm glad I got to.
From what I understand, this one deviates the most from the format. There is if I am to be believed, this is the same series. There is the Fighting Fantasy Classics on Steam, and it's set up like a book. Like, it's text-based. It's not really a game-based. You go through the pages, and it has you roll based on stuff. So it's more of like a digital version of what a game book would be. Kind of more in an interactive format. This one is like kind of its own thing. So if you're looking up Fighting Fantasy on Steam, you're going to be not close to what we're talking about. So
This is the only Fighting Fantasy game with like real-time combat.
yes.
Interesting.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Yeah.
Everything else is pretty much text-based.
Interesting.
So gameplay, I think majority of this game is how the controls work. Less so of game mechanics. So the way that you play this game is, you got your DS, right? You have a top screen and bottom screen. The top screen is your gameplay, where you're watching your character move around. The bottom screen is where the menu is. You can open up the menu on the bottom screen. It looks like a little brick and mortar almost style. And then there's a half circle ring on the top where there's almost like hotkeys, like hot buttons. Like if you're playing an RPG and you hit the 1, 2, 3, you can use items or switch between them. It's set up to where you can slot items as almost like a hotbar. And then while you're playing, you can tap it to switch items or switch weapons or whatever, use magic. But it's like a hotbar, so you don't have to go into a menu to do it because the buttons are so limited. Now the buttons, you have your directional pad on the left, and then your, what is it on it? X, Y, A, B?
Yeah.
Whatever buttons are on the right, the 4.
Face buttons.
I believe how it's set standard is the left side is for movement, and the right side is for the camera.
Yeah, it's like your right thumbstick. Yeah.
So, but the controls allows it to be flipped for left-handed and right-handed users, which
nice.
I think is a good foresight, considering it also allows you to use the touchscreen to aim. So if you're, left-handed, which is the common non-population, or uncommon population, I say. Let me just roll that back.
The non-population.
If you're left-handed, which is not as common, and if you were to try and play it the way it wanted you to, there would be no way for you to move and aim at the same time if the movement was set up on the left. So, yeah, if you can imagine being right-handed and trying to move with a stylus on the left.
That'd
that wouldn't
impossible.
work. So they implemented a way to flip the controls, which I think is really smart for them, especially the way that they're trying to build it. The attack, to actually use your weapon, is you can either tap the bottom touchscreen or you can click the bumper. So the way I personally played the game is I had to sit down. Actually, I had to lay down, honestly. I had to put a pillow down and then put my DS on top of the pillow to prop it up, because I'm only basically using one hand to hold it. So I'm moving with my left hand, because I'm right-handed, moving with my left hand, and I'm clicking the bumper to attack, and then I'm aiming with a stylus, which is how I played it. I don't know how you guys played it.
So I started out like that because I was like, hey, if I want to experience this with the DS controls. It's one of the things that sets the DS apart. And I was always a PSP kid, so I never got an original DS, so I was playing off a 3DS XL. But anyways, I wanted to play it with touch controls and all that. That's all the rage. And I said, about after 2 or 3 enemies, I said, fuck this, go in the face buttons. And for me, it was a much better experience with the buttons.
Yeah. I found the face buttons hard to control.
So I started off playing it just like Barry, because I wanted to see. This is actually the first 3DS game I've ever actually played. Fun fact.
The DS
game.
Yes.
The first time I've actually used my DS for years of owning them. Could not get attacks with the buttons. I don't know if my hands were just too cramped or what. So I very quickly changed to tap controls for the attacks. Just kind of got my left bicep gigantic and held the boy up with one hand and move, and then used the style with my right.
It's funny you guys both came up with methods of adjusting the actual system. So I just held the damn thing.
Sat on my couch.
Because you were using both hands though, Brian.
Yeah, that's true.
So you were only holding with one hand.
So I sat on my couch.
You got him.
Use them. Pillow on my elbows and then I kind of leaned back a little bit because my couch, like, you can kind of like not recline fully, but you can kind of like lay back in it and use that momentum to like hold up the 3DS and then use the stylus to look around and attack because it was easier for me to tap. I could not get my hands like the buttons are too small for me for the triggers. So like as fast and as fluid as you need to be able to attack, I couldn't get a rhythm down with the shoulder button. So I ended up using the tap, and I feel like I got some bench pressing in to DS.
Like,
so
I was fully horizontal anytime I played this game.
I was like balled up in a weird.
I had to have gravity hold it up for me with a pillow. I had to find a pillow with the perfect height for where my like elbows would rest so I could hold it.
Yeah.
I have one specific pillow that I use for like my DSs because I just, you know what? I just get tired of holding it up. All right. If I'm playing with a controller, I can lay the controller in my lap and not, use actual arm strength because I'm a little wimpy shrimp. But like, I'm holding it up. My Steam Deck thing's heavy. I hold it up. I'm not doing all that.
For the DS, it's all about the angle of that top screen, bro. If you bring it towards you a little bit, it kind of has a counterweight, so it doesn't like, there's physics behind holding a DS.
It's funny. I ended up like, because once we'll get into it, but there's not long stretches of time you can sit here and play this game for more reasons than just holding a handheld. So I end up incorporating an ottoman into my experience where I just kind of had the ottoman as a table. I'd come over and clear a couple of rooms out and go back to playing something on Xbox or PlayStation and like jump back and forth. So I end up like playing it several different ways, but my main control scheme was definitely like left hand to move, right hand stylus to look, because I tried to face buttons. It was too slow. Like the enemies are so fast and like the game.
I don't know if there was a way to increase the sensitivity, but I don't think so.
So what I did,
like it had been inaccurate.
There was a trick you could do if you're doing the face buttons. I don't know if you could do both, but if you held for example, I walked into a room and there's like 12 guys. And I was trying to keep them at a distance so I could run out the door and heal, which we'll get into all that. But you had to turn around and face the door, right? So what I would do is hold the button, and if you swiped with your finger, I didn't even use a stylus. At the same time, you did move, you did look faster. So I could
so you were like double camera.
So I could get a hit, swipe, hold the button.
So
at
it's
the
like
same
turbo
time.
mode.
Yes. So that's how I could get in, and then plus since I used the touchpad to open the doors also, so I could literally get it to a motion and just be like.
Well, yeah, I remember like playing with the controls and the buttons were so slow because it would only move you at one speed. But once I put that stylus down, I could whip it around.
Oh yeah, you can zoom. You can just whip it. It's like a mouse.
Yeah. So that's the controls.
They're interesting.
The controls. Other things I do want to highlight is the way that the character skills work is you pretty much have like a melee fighter, a ranged fighter, and then magic. And then depending on where you put your skill points, it allows you to use specific armor or specific weapons. And then once you get at a higher level, you need a combination of 2 different skills to do some of them. We didn't get that far.
I had a couple armors and stuff I couldn't use.
I found some I couldn't use because of poor decisions in the beginning, but
mine was purposely spec'd that way.
I gave Nate the hey, by the way, before you play this. And then you can pick up items. There's an inventory that you can hold on to items, and I think it's only like 12 slots, 9 or 12, I can't remember.
I want to say 12. I think.
And then like there's some healing items where it'll be like an orange or an apple you can find, and it'll give you pretty much like skill stamina or health. And the funny thing about that is once you picked those up, it wouldn't do an auto combination. So if I had 2 oranges in my inventory and I picked up another one, it would pick it up into a slot. So I'd have to go back into my inventory and then click and drag. Yep. So they would combine, so I'd have more space. It's kind of stupid.
You know what's really stupid, though? If there was like 2 waters an enemy had and you picked up those 2, that would be in one slot. But if you picked up another water, it wouldn't combine them.
That's what I mean.
Why? That's what I'm saying. Like, why?
I don't know how that was programmed, but that was one of those slightly irritating things. The map, I think, is one of the best implementations of a map in a game, especially for DS, because not only you could go into the map and it would display on the bottom screen, and it would show you what room you were currently in. It would show you the whole path. Like, it wouldn't show you until you explored that area. But it would show you doorways where it's like, oh, okay, I have been in this room and there's a door I didn't go through. Let me go check it out. And then you can click on the doors and then basically surf through the map. It wasn't like you were in an area and you couldn't go through the map to see like where you needed to go. You could backtrack on the map. So
thankfully.
Yeah, because there was a lot of things where I'm like, okay, where am I supposed to go? What's the name of this room? What's going on? But the unique thing about this is it allows you to write notes on the map And I believe it's on the system. Because I bought this game used, and so when I played it for the first time, there was no user data on it. So they must have deleted it before they sold it. But when I created my game through and started playing, there was already notes on the map. And I remember opening... I feel like the first one I remember seeing is I remember opening it up. Oh, I have a picture of it on the Discord, actually. I opened up the map, and there was an arrow pointing to a room, and it was like a bunch of dicks. It was like inside this room or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's like right beginning of the keep or whatever. It's like a big arrow and it says bunch of dicks on it. I cracked up.
Mm-hmm. And I was like, who wrote this? And I'm like, what's going on? Is this part of the game? Because I didn't know like before you could write on the map. So I was like, is this a dev joke? What is this? Did they do this? And then after I play, I saw you could write on it, and I saw, oh, I can write on it. So I would write little notes, and then knowing that Nate and Brian were going to play it after me, they would be able to see it since I saw the previous person. And then there were some rooms where I was like, I'd probably a little skull, and I'm like, you will die in here.
But lying on a couple of those.
Yeah. So I think that, like, for me, is my favorite part of the game is the map, especially the map that's being available across game saves. It's almost like, you know, back... If all three of us have a copy of this game and we're all creating our own maps, like grid-based maps how you used to, especially in old like dungeon first-person dungeon crawlers, it's like, oh, we're almost like sharing a map. Right. Where it's like, oh, hey, it's not intended for that, but I like that they kept it.
I liked it too because one of my biggest frustrations about going back and playing older style RPGs like this is like you always have that oh shit where do I go moment, and this kind of prevented that, not to the point where it was holding your hand, but it was just information you needed where you could actually find it instead of just spending hours looking for one person to talk to or something. Like Phantasy Star is a good example. You know, you didn't have to talk to that one vendor. If you didn't know that,
oh, my bad.
No, you're good. If you didn't know that, you're screwed. And you just wasted, you know, how many hours of your life. This kind of prevents that, which is a easy thing to fall back on these type of games, especially back then. So definitely appreciate that.
In my head, I'm like, what if Barry just hated us and wrote like all the wrong shit all over the map and just sent us on like this hell quest? Like that would have been hilarious.
Well, there inside the game there are other quests you can pick up too, and if you have a quest selected, there is a little compass, and on the map it'll show you a little green dot or a little red dot, or it's kind of supposed to guide you in the direction of where you need to go, but doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what's going on. So you can follow the green dot to a point to be like, okay, I need to go back to this room, and there's the person I need to talk to. Which, like, thank God. Yeah. Because there's so many times in this game where I was like, who? Where is this guy? Because the NPCs would change locations. Mm-hmm. And I would be like, okay, he's not in the room that I first met him in. Where is he at? And it took me a minute to even realize the dot was there. I almost didn't see it. And then I was like, what is this little green dot? And I'm like, oh, it's like a compass.
My only complaint was that there's quests where you got a dot and you become dependent on the dot. And then there's other ones where it's like, just go find some wax, dude. And I'm like...
Yeah, there was a couple where you had to find like iron or something, and you could just find items. So I feel like those were the ones you picked up.
Those were your side quests.
Yeah, those were side quests that you like carried with you, and then if you went into a room and found it, there it was.
Right.
There's some people who like to go down their journal and complete each one at a time, which is kind of like me. I don't like picking up too many quests at one time because then there's too many quests going on and my focus is shifted, and then sometimes there's more quests that you can't pick up because your journal's full, which is stupid, but whatever. So I feel like there were some in this game where they didn't give that to you because it was intended to be like, hey, you pick this up and then you're going to do it while you explore.
Right.
So
plus a couple mainline ones that didn't do it though. So, I mean, none of us got to the very end of this game, but...
I think I got to the 40% mark, and then I think I stepped away from it for a couple days and came back and was like, I don't know what is going on. And I had to look up a walkthrough at that point to figure out where the next point I was supposed to go, because I forgot. And I think I was in one of those moments where I didn't have a little dot.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need help.
I got it the farthest, and I got to a point where I think it was 86 or 87%. So I'm like towards the end, and this quest I picked up forever ago about finding some damn wax. Apparently it's essential to this guy opening this door. I can't find the shit. There's no dot. He said, go back to the chapel. So I've gone, there's two different little like chapel sanctuaries. I have scoured both and just could not find this wax, dude. So like, I'm not a person, like my favorite RPG of all time doesn't have quest markers at all. I don't need them, But if you're going to give them to me, either give them to me or don't give them to me. So there was times it was very helpful, but it also became dependent on it. And that's my fault, I guess. Not really the game's, but it is something I noticed with the quest markers.
I think this game did a really great job with like balancing in terms of, you know, your quest, because even if you had a side quest, like you're saying, you couldn't find the wax, but if you did find it and then talk to him, all the quests were retroactive. So if you already had that in your inventory, the dialogue would change. You'd be like, oh, hey, you have some of those ignits that I need. So like I had that exact experience where this guy wanted me to grab ignits, but I already had them on me. Ingots. Yeah. I already had them on me. So he was like, hey, I need those. And I was like, sure, quest complete, easy.
There was a couple times like I've just picked up a mushroom somewhere and then I ended up needing it later.
Right.
So there's items that you can grab while you're exploring that you're like, oh, okay, I already have this item for a quest, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Because I hate it when you go through an area and it doesn't generate that quest item until you get the quest.
Hate it.
That shit sucks.
I had enough gamer sense to be like, I'm going to need this for later instead of just discarding this random item that I've only seen once, you know.
Just like, why is this mushroom glowing?
Yeah.
Why is it sparkling?
I don't need this.
I think I need that.
Discard. It'll permanently destroy it. Yeah, go ahead. No, you don't have to worry about this game. It's a really nice balance in terms of quest lines, difficulty, being forgiving, and also not holding your hand at the same time. And I want to emphasize quest lines because the combat was not like that.
Before we move on to the combat, I will say, if you're looking up walkthroughs, there's not a lot available. You're going to go to GameFAQs. I'm looking at YouTube right now, and there's maybe 1, 2, 3 of them with emulation. There's trailers, and then there's one guy who's recorded an overhead of him playing it on a DS. So, like, as far as a visual walkthrough, because there are some times where, like, I need to see it to figure out where I need to go, you're not going to get it for this game.
Yeah, not a lot of stuff out there.
Especially the way that it works and you can do things multiple ways. You're never going to be able to go about it the same way. So, and even the GameFAQs one I used was really confusing because I'm like, where am I? What's going on? So I had to pray that I could figure it out.
It's a lot of jumping because, like you said, doing stuff in different order.
Mm-hmm.
I used the same guide as you, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, there's like, I'd get lost and be like, okay, and I'm like scrolling way up. I'm way past all that though.
Yeah,
like, damn.
Yeah.
And it's the free flowingness of like some of the quests. It's funny. Brian talked about a side quest that he like retroactively did. I had one because it's all taking place in the keep, so it's not like there's this huge area. It's all kind of self-contained. But there are like different, like I would say, areas of the keep where there's like the beginning area and then there's like a middle area. And I totally forgot what one of the side quests was. Like, damn it, I actually had to go back to like towards the beginning of the game. I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and knock this out now, even though it's like not even worth it experience wise because I'm so much farther than that. But it's cool that it's still an option. You can go back and talk to the guy like, hey, by the way, 3 hours ago, I did kill those rats for you here. Like,
yeah.
So
the combat.
Oh. The size important also.
So the combat isn't bad. I think it works. I started with a bow because I wanted the ability to use range, and I like the way it was implemented, but it's so fucking weak. But you can have a bow, you can have a melee, like I said, or magic. I don't think anybody here touched magic, so I don't have anything to say on it.
A couple fireballs.
I think I might have picked up a healing spell, just because, like, dear God, I needed it.
Yeah.
But the way it works is once you kill so many things or do so many quests, you get experience points, and then you can level up. And depending on which level you get an attribute skill point or it's an attribute point or a skill point. And sometimes you don't get one or the other. Sometimes it's just a skill point. Sometimes it's
really?
Yeah, there were sometimes
every time. Same.
I feel like there were some times where here's the thing though, is I was saving my skill points because at the very beginning of the game you only have like two available skills.
Right.
And so I didn't want to keep putting all my points in the poison weapon. So I kept saving them. So I might have lost track of how many I got because I just stockpiled them. Yeah. But there is no way to respec in this game, as far as I'm aware, which sucks balls.
It'd be news to me. It would have been helpful.
Because that was the reason why I just couldn't keep going with this game. Because like I put a lot of points into the skill for the bow. I can't remember. I think it's just skill, stamina, and luck.
Yep.
I think I put like 10 into skill before I realized like I was getting. Even with my poison weapon, which I put a lot of skill points into, I just wasn't getting the damage I need for the level I was at. And so I ended up switching to a club, but to use that, I needed to put more points into stamina. And then it got to the point where, like, I was even on both, but I was so under-leveled that at the point in the game, all of the weapons I needed to combat all of these guys, I couldn't use because I didn't have enough skill points. And there's no way to, like, go to a merchant or a save point and spend gold to respec, which I really need. This game really, really needed.
Yeah, it did.
It is not a game that leaves a whole lot of room for experimenting.
No.
You have to know what type of character you build. And Barry played it first and said, hey, by the way, like, pick a guy and go. So I basically made a berserker. Like, got it.
I said don't pick the bow.
I got to like level 30 something, almost hot, like low 40s, I want to say. I think that's like 42, 43. Everything in berserk. Like, literally, I end up maxing it, so I end up just start doing health regen after, but it was like I would just turn the berserk ability on and just two-handed axes just swing. Like, if you hit me, I'm screwed, but like if I hit you, like you're feeling it. So
I did a glass cannon build also. But it's funny you bring up the point about the merchants. Like, they sell better weapons, and I was like, oh, I'm not doing enough damage. Let me go buy a better weapon. But then it was like, oh yeah, you need, this much stamina, this much luck, whatever points that I didn't have. You're right. Like, it's a huge missed opportunity. They didn't have the ability to at least maneuver. Even if there was a penalty, like something, there needed to be some sort of way, because
I just wish there was, like, the merchants would sell you a potion where you take the potion and you get all of your points back and you can respec them. And so the way this game works is once you finish the game, you can play it again and keep all of your weapons and your skill points, almost like New Game Plus.
Oh, that's cool.
Which probably would make it a lot easier on the second and third playthrough. But the first one is such a struggle for me because A, I didn't know how it worked. And then B, I've got, halfway through the game before I realized I kind of screwed the pooch in the beginning. So I was at the point where I'm like, okay, do I want to stay in this area for hours and experience grind? Because I don't know what the cap is. Right? I don't know what the level cap is. So what if I'm at that point where I've already spent 10 levels into skill and I don't want skill anymore? And then I get to the cap and I don't have enough skill points to even, like, do the rest of it. So that for me was a reason why I ended up dropping this game, because I just got to the point where I was halfway through the game. I couldn't really progress without just hours of grinding experience. And it's so physically taxing on my hands.
Yeah, that is a point that needs to be brought up.
Oh, man.
My hand, like, my poor right hand, from being balled up and holding this pen.
It was my left one. I was crab clawing the movement in the button. So I would have. That's why I let it sit there on the pillow so I could do this and do this. But crab claw, and it's just so physically taxing to play this game that I couldn't play it, I think, for more than 4 hours. 4 hours was my max.
See, I didn't have physical problems, but
you also didn't play with the stylus.
Right. The mental, that's the thing. The mental for me was like, because of the way my character was spec'd, or lack of, rather, I got into this room, there was 12 guys, and like, before then, I was hitting everybody 2-3 shots because my glass cannon ability, it was nice for the first third of the game. Yeah. But you get to a point where it just it throws up both birds and says, fuck you, you're not getting past here. So what I would do, I would try to keep the guys in the middle of the room, because if you get them too close to the door, when you go back into the room to heal, they'll just be there and then destroy you. So I had to keep kind of like pushing and pulling in the combat. Like, you'd walk towards them, take a swing, back up so they miss, sprint back to the door if they do hit you, and just hope and pray that all 12 of them don't come to the front of the door. So for me, it was like, I'd literally, like Nate said, I'd set the DS down, heal, because I ran out of heal potions. And I was like, it's fine, I can do this. But you make one mistake, like, you pay for it. Like, there's
It got to the point where I got the health and stamina regeneration, and I dumped my points into that. Because at one point, if you can dosey-do them and you're not taking damage after a certain amount of time, you start healing, even while you're moving. So nice. I was trying to do it to where I could move, hit them, back off, and they wouldn't hit me enough times for me to actually heal while I'm still trying to fight them.
Yeah, especially later on.
The ranged bow just did so little damage that, like, I just couldn't keep up.
Which is bullshit, because I was gravy with, like, I'm like, whatever, I can outlast the time for this game, I don't care, until they started throwing stuff. When they started, when they had projectiles, like, it would hit me once or twice. The first time you get hit with one of those little elemental bolts, dude, over. Wiped. Or the flying enemies that shoot it was insanity. I was like, what a difficulty spike. And to me, it was like artificial, because the game is a shorter game. It really is when the red orcs are first introduced where you feel that and you're like, oh man, okay, here's a tougher enemy. And then you take a second to get used to the red orcs and how much you have to actually battle them. They almost feel like mini bosses the first time, because there's the green ones, and after a while you're like, okay, I figured out the green ones, now we're going to introduce the red ones, and I'm like, okay, here's a difficulty spike.
And I was okay with that until you get to basically like the next room and you've got beholders, basically. I don't even know what the fuck those things were called.
Those things are insane.
One shot you. I walked into a room where there were 2 of those, and then one of the little elemental guys. And the little elemental guys shoot their little fireballs, and the fireballs are fast.
They're so fast.
So it just, that jump of enemy types was like, I should have leveled 15 levels before we hit these guys. They're smoking me.
So just to carry on your point, so I was like 4 or 5 levels higher than you when I got to the percentage you were at, Barry.
Yeah.
So I was like, I won't run this. Nah, bro, they're still smoking. Like, because I was like very cautious and because Barry said like, hey, like please. So I spec'd all Berserk, dude. Like I said, so it didn't matter though. Even later in the game, because I had weapons where I was getting attack bonuses where like out of axe I did 500 damage, like plus 500. So like I should just be able to one shot. No difference. I went back to the beginning of the game to fight like the big bad white orcs that were so hard. No difference. Still took 2-3 shots. I'm like, I'm using a significantly better weapon. It doesn't feel like I'm doing anything different. I'm significantly leveled higher. Like nothing. So it honestly felt like it didn't even matter to a degree, even if you knew what you were doing in quotations. The spec, like the combat, no matter what level you're doing, it's like a little dance you have to do of like running forward, dodging projectiles, making sure you're close enough to your exit to get out so you can let the screen sit and heal for 30 minutes.
That was the roughest part, is knowing that like I can go into a room and do a little bit of damage and then I have to run back out and stand by the door and just heal.
Yeah, that's to say if you didn't die, because if you did die, this game knows you're going to die.
Oh my god,
So
let us talk about the autosave death.
It auto-saves.
Death loop.
And if you get hit with like elementals, so I had a specific room. I was like, I might be in a death loop. I ended up getting out. Took me like 9 tries literally, but I had 3 elementals in a room, and they all shot projectiles at me. So I had about like a half second.
Is it that small room?
Mm-hmm. The one that's like there's 2 side doors and there's like a long, So they hit me right when I walked through the doors. Boom, boom, boom. Auto-saved right before I got hit with this damn fireball.
It auto-saves as you walk into the room.
Yeah.
So the second you die and you pop up, you're in the room with the same enemies that just killed you.
Yeah.
And you have to keep rinse and repeat until you can find a way to swing around and get out the door before they kill you.
So, yeah, it took me about literally 8 or 9 tries. I ended up getting hit by one fireball, not dying, and like getting out of dodge before, which opens up a new autosave once you re-enter the room. But I know, Barry, you got caught in a death loop a couple times.
I got caught in the death loop with 2 beholders and an elemental in the
God.
fucking storage room. And I was like, I can't. So I got to the point where I was just in a death loop so many times that I just kept doing the autosave. And then I noticed that every single autosave, it generated different enemies.
Yep.
And I think the one I finally got out of was... It was really funny because I remember one time I loaded the autosave and that elemental was right up in my face immediately. It wasn't even like they were in the back of the room and they came up. It was right there already. I said, you gotta be kidding me. But I think I got one to where it was a beholder and they don't attack you immediately. You have a chance to like breathe for 1 second. And he was right there. And then my elemental buddies got stuck behind a table. So when they would shoot, it would hit the table. It wouldn't hit me. So, but that was after like a bunch of autosave loading to get the enemies in a shitty position for me to leave. I got out of a death loop and it was terrible. I never went in that room again. I didn't step foot in there. I said, I didn't give a shit what's in this room. I'm leaving.
See, shit like that was my biggest criticism of this game. It's not a skill issue. It's literally RNG on top of just like artificial difficulty. And that's the biggest knock. This game could have been, quite frankly, a masterpiece if it wasn't for that for me. That's the biggest knock I have on this game, is where any sort of fun or satisfaction you get out of it, just go into another room and there's a high probability of a dice roll that you're going to get shit on. And it's not your fault. Like, yeah, you might have spec'd your character wrong, but also there's no ability to respec. So at what point do you start pointing fingers at the devs?
Yeah, this game definitely like breaks you physically and mentally.
Also, the lockpicking sucks balls.
I was a master at it. It took me a minute to figure it out.
The spinny one, I never had enough time.
Yeah,
Did you put any...
I didn't even use the stylus. I used my finger. I don't know if that helped too. But like,
how?
Dude, actually, at first I couldn't figure it out because I'm like, this is weird.
You're going to put this in a DS and you're going to show me.
I'll show y'all. Because that's why I was like, I got to at least get one so I know what the fuck I'm talking about for this. But like, eventually...
I got the one without the spinning
I got to the point where it was just like... And I had like, maybe a fraction of time left, but like, I could do it.
Okay, the way the lockpicking in this game works is you have to touch... It's a touch screen input and you have to travel a little ball in like a little...
You have to like
it's like a maze, and there's little spring levers that you have to go like drag the ball right and then go up to push the spring lever and then go down the path to push another spring lever. And then as it gets more difficult, there's these little circles with a half moon cutout that spin, and you have to like put the little ball inside of there, but you can't touch the edge.
It's like Operation.
Yes. How?
It's a
did
tiny
you fat
canal.
finger it?
No
that's
shit.
I don't know. I don't know, because at first I did struggle with it, and then like eventually I got to this point where I was like, oh, this just makes sense to me, and I could just Sherry was even like,
Especially
that's
the ones with,
impressive.
like, the spinning wheel.
Spinning
like,
one.
I ran out of time.
It's
I'd be
timing,
waiting for
bro.
the wheel to move, but you're out of time.
Yeah.
Like, you do like 3
Before
seconds, you
you
do 8
start
blocks.
you
know,
have
like,
to go as soon as you're up at the top of the first spring, come down when it's on the right side so you can get in.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
but
fine.
I
I
get
still
in,
had
and then
3
the-
seconds short.
And then the time runs out.
And it's like, then you lose health for missing the
I'll
lock.
show y'all.
Yeah,
I'll
if you
show y'all.
fail,
Throw it
if
in.
you fail the lock, you do lose health.
Yeah.
And it just got to the point where I'm trying to open a chest in hopes that there's an item in there that I can use for the enemies that are currently attacking me, and then I got just splatted, and I was like, fuck these chests, I'm not. I annotated them on the map as I went, so maybe later when I could figure out how the lockpicking worked, I'd go back and open them. And then I got to the point where I was like, I do not care. I'm not putting any points in lockpicking because I need the
Same.
points for other shit.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I'd walk up to a chest and be like, is it locked? And just walk away. If it was unlocked, like, sweet, I'll open it and see what's in there. But if not, I'm not even going to try because...
This game got to the point where I almost wanted to just, you would go into a room and you would pray you could run past the enemies to the next one. I wasn't even
definitely-
going to fight anything.
Yeah, and there's things where I was leveled appropriately, but it's like, this isn't even worth the struggle or the mental like fortitude to
No.
fight. If it is one of the beholder dudes, I wasn't even trying to fight him unless
No.
I had to. There's a couple of rooms that they appear in later in the game where it's so narrow and tiny. Imagine like a 1-bedroom apartment and having like a beholder in it, and it's like, well, I got to get through them. There's a couple rooms like that where I end up having to fight them.
I don't know what they were called, but they weren't beholders, but they looked
No,
like
but like
beholders.
if you guys know what a beholder is, that's what it
It
was.
looked like a beholder with a bunch of eyeballs.
Those
on
were
it.
called I Throw in the Towel. Fuck this, because that's about when I did it.
As a character that was spec'd to like go hand to hand, like I avoided fights even. So it just was tough, man. And not even like in a I can figure this out way. It's like, well, if the gods have mercy on me, I can get this through.
It's unfortunate
Isn't
too.
satisfying.
Because I thought this game was like really, really fun, and like the hamper on it was the artificial difficulty spike. Like I said earlier, this would have been my dream game growing up, like a portable first-person real-time combat RPG on the go. I would have bought a DS for this if I would have known this was a thing back in the day, and then I would have played it and said, "Wow, fuck, this is really hard." So it's unfortunate. I think this could have been something with just a couple quality of life touches, man. Like you would have had a really special game.
So the sound in this game, a few notes. The music was composed by Tomislav Slogar, for what music you heard.
Did you say the song?
The music was only... You were only able to hear the music in the menus, and they did that because this game runs in 60 frames a second, which is crazy for a DS. Like, we're not talking DS, like 3DS, we're talking Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
Like first generation models. So they only played it within the menu to maintain the 60 frames a second, because they said they needed, there was an interview on fanboydestroy.com where they basically said, like, that's the reason why there's no music when you're exploring, because we needed the CPU power for the frame rate. That being said, there are still sound effects, like walking, swiping, doors opening, you getting injured,
Some battle cries.
when you're using abilities, yeah.
Cave drippings.
Cave dripping. So that's really it for the sound.
Rat squeaking.
That's kind of really it.
Yeah.
And then even then, like, I can't say much for the music composition because it just goes through that 3DS,
Yeah.
you know, speaker.
I think it's similar to when we talked about the story. You have to take the limitations into account. Like, I don't think the footsteps and stuff sounded bad. I don't think everything was serviceable. It's also extremely limited hardware. They did what they could. The lack of music is jarring, and you definitely notice it. But I understand it from a technical standpoint, so it's hard to sit there and be like, there should have been music, because like the game does play exceptionally well.
They intentionally sacrificed music. It was a choice. It wasn't they forgot.
Yeah.
So to do the thing that they wanted to do was to showcase graphically and mechanically this game functioning on a DS. They sacrificed the music, which...
If that's the case, mission accomplished,
Yeah,
man. Because I
absolutely.
kept forgetting this was a DS game.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a nice looking 3DS game. No, it's a DS game. So, yeah, it is jarring. It is, especially when you're going down long hallways and you just hear and then or a ghoul bellowing. But and again, it's like you said, Barry, it's a choice, and I support that choice because it's a looker.
I will say, I can't really comment too much on the music because it got to the point where I noticed I wasn't even listening to it, and I'm not sitting in the menus for hours, so
Yeah.
I pretty much was just like, I don't really care about the footstep noises and me screaming, so I would just watch, or I would listen to YouTube videos at the same time. You know, I would listen to Dungeons and Dragons fucking YouTube videos while I'm playing my stupid little Dungeons and Dragons type game on the DS. So, like, the sound for me just got cut out early on, because I was just like, it's kind of a nothing.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad. It was just a nothing.
That's the thing. It wasn't offensive enough where you feel like you had to listen to something else, which I think that's worth, that's a +1 in
Yeah.
my book. If it's like, if all you have is sound and it's horrible, like I've had games before where it's like, I'm turning this shit off. This sounds awful. It was nothing annoying where it's like, this is a horrible screech that I can't handle. So, hey, if you're going to have a lack of sound, make sure it's at least serviceable. And I feel like this game was completely serviceable.
Yeah, I think the sacrifice was worth it in the end, honestly, because it stands out in other aspects. Like, Mr. Spock said it best: the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So they did their job.
I thought that was the Bible.
I mean, depends who you ask.
Wrath of Khan, same thing.
That being said, since the music and the sound was kind of a nothing, we'll go to graphics, where one sacrificed, the other flourished.
Yeah, because that
A lot
wasn't
more to talk
something.
about.
Yeah. So, the graphics in this game, the first time I played it, I was like, this looks like a Shadowbox pop-up book. And knowing that this was based off of a game book that's text-based, it really feels like they took a storybook and made it into a game. Because the way that the animations work is, you kind of go into a 3D environment room, but the enemies are two-dimensional, and they move around like they're paper. And their arms will move or they'll throw stuff, but the way that they walk is kind of like in a two-dimensional item in a three-dimensional space. Like, imagine if you're taking like a little cardboard standee cutout and you're moving them in a room, but you're not twisting them. That's kind of how this game looks.
It's very Doom-esque.
And it looks great. It looks fantastic. For a DS game, it's the best looking DS game I've ever seen.
No doubt.
The best running DS game I've ever seen.
I agree.
It is a sight to behold. Now, a sight to play, but it is probably one of the best DS games I've ever seen. Fully 3D. It's not 2D. Like, there's some really good 2D, like, pixel art DS games, but, like, my goodness, the graphics is probably the best I've ever seen on this platform.
It literally reminded me of an old Elder Scrolls game, and that's what made me happy about it. I'm like, this looks like Daggerfall, but just cleaner, runs a little smoother.
Daggerfall was the one I heard a lot of.
Way more animations. Like, again, I keep saying it, I forgot this was a DS game. Like, I was blown away. I knew nothing going in, too, so I was just like, holy shit, as soon as I threw it in.
It really looks like they took a PC game and somehow crunched it down into a DS.
Yeah.
It felt like playing an old school adventure
If
game.
this game came out today for like modern consoles, they'd be like, oh, they did that like, retro style, and that's what it looks like. It performs great.
A boomer shooter, but
Yeah.
a boomer
We're
crawler.
in right now.
Boomer
Yeah.
crawler.
Honestly, this will like fit right in now too. That's a testament to like the art design and
This could have easily been like Fighting Fantasy, take out the touch input, but a Switch
yeah, no doubt.
version.
And I think what adds to how it looks is how it plays too. It runs so well. There's no
It
hiccups.
runs crazy
You
smooth.
can be getting shot by, Brian said earlier, literally 12 enemies, and there's no slowdown. There's no.
I did get slowdown.
I
You
got
some?
one instance.
I did
Really?
get slowed
I got
down.
one instance.
I can't remember where I went through, but I just was trying to pray and run through a room full of enemies, and it chugged.
Damn.
I got one instance where it was a transition from when I pulled up the map and then went back to the game, but then it did catch up.
It was like, I feel like it was, I want to say it was a room full of dwarves. And it had spawned so many of them in there that I was just trying to get to the other side.
That long hallway where you
stuttered.
have to
No, it was the long hallway with the big giant door that you were trying to go through, but there was another one that you had needed to go in to get something.
Okay.
And I think it was that room where I was like, gasping for air, trying to get to the end. And that was the only slowdown I had, but it just spawned so many enemies inside there for some reason. I was like, why? Why, God, why?
There is a couple times where it'll just throw. I didn't have any stuttering problems. I mean, even if it's just an instance here or there, like you gotta think the backgrounds are moving and stuff too. There's like running water. There's never any like static, like non-moving. There's always something going on in the background. So I think this game looks great.
It was really animation heavy. I was surprised too because first person perspective with like the kind of Doom style characters, it's a swing and a miss sometimes. But this game, even the dwarves, like I remember like when they would switch directions to look at you, like the hair would flip shoulder to shoulder. I'm like, this is pretty cool.
The enemies are pretty much moving consistently all the time. The NPCs where you need to talk to for quests, they are stationary, which why I lost them sometimes. Because I was like, where's the guy? And he's standing there, but he blended into the environment because I'm used to everything moving. I'm like, if everything's moving, I need to shoot at it. If it's not, then it's just part of the wall. But it's just, there was constantly moving.
This really does not look like any other game on the DS. Because the only other first-person game I've ever played on the DS was Metroid Prime Hunters. And it's like pseudo 3D. It runs really slow. This is like the antithesis of that. It doesn't look like anything Nintendo either. Like the very first, second or third character you see is a woman with cleavage. And it's like, this isn't supposed to be on a Nintendo console. This is crazy. There's so many things where this game just stands apart from every other kind of, like, you got to get the handheld, the Nintendo out of your brain because it's nothing like that. It's really unique, and especially to be on a DS. Like, this is an old school PC game, is what it felt like, on the go.
I'll give a little tip of the cap to the environments too, honestly, because you gotta think this game takes place in one setting, and there's a fair amount of variety for being limited on a DS. Like, there's like banquet halls, there's like traditional prison style dungeons, there's poison filled rooms, there's caverns, there's caves. Like, they did a good job with making it kind of feel like it is more than just a big old cave.
It definitely took a second to get there. That first part of the game, like, there's the town and the walkway up to the mountain, and then once you enter the mountain, it is like the same looking keep, the same looking merchant, the same looking torture chamber, the same drawbridge area. Like, the whole environment is the same, really, up until you get to a point where it's like, oh, there's a waterfall here, there's a what's that? You have to go through the little fountain to get to the cave. And there's other parts that start to break open the further you get. But the bottom of the keep is very, like, you're inside of a cave mountain. And then it starts to blossom a little bit into, like, okay, this is a constructed dwarven area. But that first part chugging through it, it's a lot of the same.
It's like a coal mine, kind of.
Yeah.
Then it's like
prison cells.
You start going into it, and there's like a library. There's like a throne room. Like, it becomes very, like, it does become varied once you get into like the depths.
Yeah, once you start to get to the top of the mountain, obviously it's going to be all the fancy smashy shit up there, because, like, we don't go down to the peasants, obviously.
Yeah, wouldn't know. I didn't make it that far.
Yeah.
But yeah, this looks nothing like any other kind of DS game you've ever played. It really stands out. For me, the high, for sure, was the graphics. It was crazy. I was blown away. And I had no idea. Like I said, I knew nothing going in. Even if you look at the back of the box, you're like, oh, this looks interesting. Then you see it in motion, you're like, shit.
There was, they pretty much talked about how, like, there was a lot of technical things that they had to work out in the beginning, but they got those out pretty quickly. And their focus was every single piece of, like, graphic or art that needed to be put in adjusted the frame rate. And they had to optimize as they went constantly to keep that frame rate. So, clearly these devs were very focused on optimizing 60 frames a second and making it look pretty. The rest of it didn't feel like as much as the focus.
Hey boy, times have changed, huh? Devs actually optimizing their game.
So
it's weird.
our last section of this, price and collectibility. Now, this game is weird. From what I can find, the estimated sales number for the North America is about 80,000. I didn't find anything for Europe or Japan. I don't know. Up until about 2017, it was around $30 complete in box.
God.
I bought this game for $2.99.
Oh.
So.
Yep, worth it. Episode's done.
Just
damn.
You know, like there is a chain of stores around us that DS games, especially like the shitters and the shovelware, they price at $2.99 because that was their cheapest price point. And a lot of these RPGs on the DS were kind of considered a shovelware. This one, Orcs and Elves, is another one I picked up for $2.99.
Nice.
Like, it was just like, oh, fighting fantasy looks weird. It's got an orc on it. I want it. And I bought, the story of this from I Bought It is I sold Beat Mania for $50 in store credit because I think there was a mess up in the system. So I took advantage of that and sold Beat Mania for $50 in store credit. I bought Zelda Spirit Tracks and Fighting Fantasy for a total of like $46. So I traded Beat Mania for basically both of those games.
Good trade.
That was years ago. But for some unknown reason, it started to jump up to about $50, and it kept going, and it kept going. Took a dip in 2020. Damn. And then 2021, it just went to the space. So currently it is selling for, current sales recently, selling for $80 to $100 loose for just the cartridge. Complete $200. Yeah. The cheapest available right now is $80 loose and $180 complete in box, and there is only one available on eBay. So it questions the scarcity of this game. There's not a lot of options to buy. When I was looking on price charting, there was we're almost halfway through the year at this point, and there was maybe like 20 to 30 complete in box sales, which is nothing compared to some of these games. I mean, you want to talk about especially popular games that are printed a lot that are the same price point, there's going to be way more sales for those. So this one has, I feel like, an actual scarcity to it, considering right now the only availability is one complete in box and a bunch of loose.
It's the DS curse too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the DS curse. I mean, that's why you're paying an extra $100 for a box.
So with these handheld games, this might as well be a paper box and manual.
But even then, if we're talking about the availability of, let me just pull it up because there's not a lot of these ready. Like
yours is the only one I've ever seen.
Fighting Fantasy DS, not the book. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There is 8 loose carts available in one complete in box. Yeah. Which 8 loose carts for a DS on eBay is crazy.
That is absolutely insane.
I think there is an actual scarcity to it.
Yeah.
Recently sold, there was only one complete in box recently sold, and that was $200. Yeah. So I don't know how long they keep their sales data. It sold May 21st. Brand new sealed, actually.
For $200?
And then a pre-owned one, March 24th for $200.
Damn, someone stole that sealed one.
So,
it's interesting.
One bid.
It's interesting. Let's put it this way, Barry. How many have you seen since you bought yours?
I've never seen another one.
Ryan?
Yeah, this is the only one I've ever seen.
I've literally never seen this game other than yours, Barry. So, like, I think we live in a populated enough area, and we frequent game stores enough where one of us would have seen. I've seen more Water Worlds on Virtual Boy than I've seen this. You know what I mean?
I mean, I've never seen this loose.
No, I never see this game.
So
this is definitely one of those games like if you know, you know, and you don't.
I'm glad
really
I picked it up because I picked it up on a whim, and I have no idea what it was about. But I was like, it's got fighting and it's got fantasy in it. That's cool. Grabbing it. But I think there is a real scarcity to this game, and I can't tell you why the price is so high. You know, I initially thought it was because the iOS stuff got pulled, but that was in 2012. That wasn't in 2021. And I mean, it shot up in price before Nintendo announced that they were shutting the store down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't because the store said, I mean, it got an increase again because they said, okay, the shop's closing. I don't even know if this was available on the shop.
I doubt it.
I've got no idea. But this shot up prior to that announcement, so I can't even correlate the two.
We can't even blame a YouTuber or anything.
Yeah, I was just about to say,
nothing out there.
I can't blame a YouTuber or a streamer because there's just nothing available on this game.
Just definitely feels like one of those. Sorry, go ahead.
The only other thing I can think of is the popularity of tabletop gaming post-COVID, but even then, that's a very odd choice.
Stretch, yeah.
But it does make sense if people are getting into a fighting fantasy series that is strictly based on a single-player game book.
It's true.
Because, you know, everyone's in isolation so much, you got used to playing a single-player game. Not a lot of people were ready and set up to do, you know, continue campaign sessions with friends over web chat and Zoom and all of that. A lot of people had to adjust even for work. So it's not like people were ready to set up for that.
Right.
So if you have to turn to something that is like a single player, I'm by myself, it makes sense that fighting fantasy might have seen an uptick.
That's an interesting point.
And then people might have been interested, like, oh, there's games for it too. Oh, there's a DS game for it. And it kind of crosses over a little bit. But that's the most that I can even fathom of why this went up so high.
Yeah, that's probably it. Like, there's not a whole lot else you can really point to. And then, like, I will say the tabletop community is very passionate. So if this is like a beloved franchise, that people that are into it are going to be into it, and they're probably not going to get rid of them either. You know what I mean? Like, tabletop people are extremely passionate. So,
I mean, they'll even take the bad for the bad.
yes,
Like, you just take what you get.
which is like nice for a community for once. Damn, they're not super toxic.
But 80 loose,
That's wild, bro.
180 complete. What do you guys think? Is it worth the price?
This is such a strange game for me because here's the terminology I always use to determine, like, what's worth it or not. Like, I don't have it. I thought it was a super unique game, so of course I want it. And this is the only way you're going to play it. You know, you got to pay to play.
And I will say, it's very difficult on emulation.
Yeah.
I've tried it.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
But here's another thing I've always taken into consideration too. Like, what else for that console specifically can you get with that same price point roughly? So you've got your, you know, your off-brand Mega Man games, your Star Forces, Dakapon Journey. It's like, you know, your typical heavy hitters. Like, this is up there for DS titles as far as price goes. It's not far behind Little Red Riding Hood Zombie Barbecue, which is like, you know, at one point.
I see that so many times. I've seen so many of those.
I've seen it more than this.
Exactly. So call me crazy, but everything else I see on this list, it's like Heart Gold, Soul Silver, complete. I see more of those complete. I've seen more Commando Steel Disaster. Like, all these games that are at your top echelon DS games, I see them. I don't see this. And like, this is the only way you're going to play it. You know, you have to buy this to play it physically. So in the past, I've stuck to my guns. I'm going to stick my guns on this one. Like, I don't see this going down anytime soon.
This game's a little low in my app. It's actually quite low. It says 130, but
yeah,
right now it's about 180.
Buy it for 130 if you see it right now.
But even then, if you look at the comparable games in that section, like, I see them. I don't see this. This thing's a damn ghost. Like,
this is the same price point as like Pokemon White and Black, and those are printed out the booty hole. But you got the, you know, that's the,
yeah.
you know,
Sorry.
that's the Pokemon tax on it.
Yep.
There's a, you know, White and Black are considered like the best of the Pokemon, especially on DS, and those are wanted for remakes. But like, that's still the Pokemon tax. So if you're not getting, I mean, I've got Dragon Quest V. Dragon Quest V is a similar price, but it's the only Dragon Quest game that we haven't had remade, or it took us so long to even get it over here.
Yeah.
So, you know, and Blue Dragon Awaken is another one where it's about the same price, but it's Blue Dragon Awaken. Right. You've got the Sakaguchi tax on that one, and Toriyama.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is just like an unknown nothing game,
right?
Other than like a very small community that knows fighting fantasy.
Which in my book, that means you're not going to get a remake. You're not going to get a remaster.
No,
which
you
would
never
be,
will for this.
Honestly, that's the saddest part of all this too. This thing on a Switch with some like modern touches would be a fucking masterpiece. So it breaks my heart. But like, to me, this is one that's like actually kind of rare. You know, actually scarce. I'm gonna go ahead and say, yeah, this is worth it, and it's got potential to go up. Like I said, if someone's holding on to their copies and starts hoarding them, and it's expensive just because you don't ever see them floating around, which appears to be the case, I'm gonna say if you see this out and about and it's cheap, pick it up. Worth it. And it's such a unique game too. Like, there's nothing, play it for 20 minutes. There's nothing else like it. Like, you're going to be like, wow, this is a unique experience that you can only experience with this cartridge. Pull that trigger, man. Like, it's a lot of money, but if for me, I like weird, unique. This is so far up my alley. It's not even funny. Like, I enjoyed my time with it, even for its faults, which it had some, but it's truly a standalone, unique experience, which is huge for me. This is a game I do want in my collection, but you know, I'm going to have to pay to get it, and I don't want to pay that much for it. But for me, if I do, I'm going to start looking and maybe start trying to haggle and do some trades. Like, this is a cool game. Like, You're not going to find anything else like it.
I will say emulation, if you have a modded DS, will work perfectly fine for this. When you talk about emulation on PC, that becomes the difficulty.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to go through the legwork of having a modded or a broken DS and putting this game on there and playing it that way, the emulation on PC is very difficult because of the touch input. You can't use the hotkeys unless you have a touch input.
Yeah.
I mean, the emulation does work on the Steam Deck because the Steam Deck is a touchscreen, but the way that the deck works is you have a little screen and a big screen, and you have to flip between them. And if you want to see what you're doing, you have to sacrifice your touch.
Damn.
So just keep that in mind.
I can't think of a single reason why this isn't worth it. Honestly, you have scarcity, you have RPG tax, you have a licensed property tax, you have handheld with a complete case tax, a game that has potential to go up, in my opinion, if more people catch on, especially stateside to Fighting Fantasy, like, especially Wizard owning it now.
If one YouTuber makes a video, this is going...
I was literally going to say, if one YouTuber decides to break out the DS and, hey, you guys remember... And I think this game has potential to grow. It is a short game. That is, but like, I think
it's a short game if you know what you're doing.
Well, even then, yeah,
it's got replay value. Though.
I think it's I'm just making up little tiny knocks on it. Honestly, I can't think of a single legitimately good reason why this isn't worth it. Even at $200, which is fairly steep. Like, I've paid $200 for shit I'd trade for this all day. So, very quick answer, yeah, absolutely, this is worth it. Piggybacking off everything Brian said, plus I think this game truly has more room to grow. So,
I'm not your financial advisor, but all it takes is from this Hidden Gems video, which some famous YouTuber will make the video about it, and then it turns into a $400 game.
Yeah, I think this one is one of those games that I can't figure out why it's so expensive, but there's nothing as far as an artificial inflation that tells me it couldn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Especially within RPGs. It is just going to take one person to take a look at it and make a video. And it's one of those DS games that's never talked about. Like, ever. So, who's to say clocks are ticking if you want to be that person to go make the video first. But there's review ones out there. I mean, there's videos. There's Fighting Fantasy DS review, but you gotta think this is 600 views. Fighting Fantasy trailer by IGN has 5,000 views. Trailer, 2,000 views.
Let me rephrase my terminology. I said YouTuber. I meant influencer or market manipulator. That's what I meant.
I'm just saying, as far as like YouTube traffic in general, like,
not a lot.
That's it. I have
even your review videos.
I've got 1, 2. That's an ad. 3, 4, 5 with a collection of 14 videos. 6, 7, 8. There's 8 videos on YouTube. And then you go into board game retrospective, you go into book review, take a look at the book, Dice Friends, like the actual tabletop version of this game. There's no videos of this game.
They're all short too.
And they're short. They're
like 7 minutes long. I noticed that too. Like, there's no one that sat there and...
I think the
longest one is this one. He's got 14 videos, and they're all about half an hour apiece, playing through all of them. So that's the closest you're going to get to a visual walkthrough.
Right.
And that's why I said when you want to reference this for your own walkthrough, they might have done it in a different order, and it's really difficult to look at. But there's only one person who's done a full playthrough of this. This is a speedrun any percent.
Saw that.
And then 8 minutes of gameplay, a review, and then 2 trailers.
Like, potentially we're talking about this game more than anyone else has by taking an hour and a half.
To be honest, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, no one talks about it.
I mean, the review is 2 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. So like, no one knows about this game. And it's shocking.
If you want to go check out like Reddit, there's a subreddit for it, but even then it's just a small amount of people, but they love the game.
They're very passionate. I checked it out.
Yeah. So there's just really nothing out there about this. And it's so hard to find a game nowadays in this kind of gaming bubble that doesn't have a big following and has no voice, pretty much. So, very curious where this one goes. I think it has I don't think it's going to go down. $200 is so much money, though.
I know. That was my only holdup. But again, my things, and I'm not your financial advisor, like, I can't beat this point enough. One guy in particular makes a video about this, and it's out of affordability range. Yeah, $200 is a lot of money, but it takes one video that maybe gets released a week before everybody else gets a chance to see it, turns into a $400, $500 game overnight.
I know this is just our little slice of life here locally, but like, none of us have ever seen it. I've seen more Kuons. I've seen more
Rule Rows, more
Nintendo
Kuons,
World Championship carts in
more
this.
Tron Bonds.
Yeah. This is just our little slice, but like, all three of us are pretty tapped into like checking out, local stores, stuff online. But like, there's no, I mean, to the point you said, my app's the same way. Like, there's not enough sales data to like show what this game's truly worth. Yeah. So, but you can find Nintendo World Championships where it updates the value because enough of them sell, and there's lots of those.
Well, those are also trading hands a lot.
Sure.
I mean, you also have to think the games that don't have a lot of them in existence, they do trade hands quite frequently. Yeah. So you're going to get more sales data because the same copy might have sold 4 times in the same year.
Very true.
Collectors are holding on to this too. Like I said, if this covers a lot of bases, like you said, Nate. If you're a tabletop fan, if you're an RPG fan, a DS, first person.
This is for a very specific person.
Yeah.
And it's not for those... Like, this isn't someone's, like, Nintendo DS Grail. It's for a very specific person who likes to play DS, who wants to play DS, who likes to collect DS, and those people don't let their games go.
They ain't let them go. That's a thing.
So
I think it's kind of got like that bubble bobble effect, but a smaller console than obviously the NES, where it's like the reason why it's expensive because they don't pop up. This has tons of room, man. I swear. Like, again, and
even then in Bubble Bobble, the ones that pop up are getting traded frequently.
Exactly, because it's an NES game. This is legitimately scarce.
Might F around and seriously buy this one on eBay. Like
180. This is one that you're gonna need to save an eBay search for and watch when new low listings come up to try and snipe it. Like, this is the only way you'd ever get it at a price. Yeah. So
and that's I've been a little picky about what I'm buying lately too, but I think you said with emulation thing on this, like, it's one of those consoles I want to experience it on that actual console too. So I think this literally has everything possible going for it.
This is one of the most unique DS games I've ever played.
Hands down. I would say portable. Like, I'll go that far. I'll say like portable, handheld. This would have been such a dream if I would have known it existed. Like, this is all I wanted as a kid. Like,
would you have the patience for it, though?
Biting fingernails and being like, I want to go home and play Morrowind so bad. But it's like, dude, you had a first-person real-time combat game on the go.
Back then, it's the only game you had, so yeah.
That's the thing. True. Yeah, you didn't have a choice back then. This is like your parents were nice, by the grace of God, and bought you a game. You had to get good at it. It probably would have been a less frustrating thing now. Like, we're spoiled now. But yeah, for me, this is a special game. Like I said, it's not a perfect game by any means. I think we went over the criticisms, and they're all very legitimate. But this is such a unique, standout experience where it's like, I'm really glad I got to play it. Like, super thankful that you picked this game.
I even think the Metacritic scores got something going with as far as value, because I think for people very much topically speak now on like, hey, notice the disparity between critical and user. Mm-hmm. This game's a perfect example of that. That is a huge variance between, what did you say, 45 and 70?
48 and 7.8 or 42 or something like that.
Then, bro. That is...
The days gone of DS.
But the opposite.
But actually unique.
So I think like this is one of those games I think people actually play it, they can start going to bat for, and will get like passionate about defending its honor and stuff too. So
I do want to bring up Darkspire on the DS is another one that is a first person dungeon crawler. It is 2-dimensional. It's a lot more text-based, and it's a little bit more stylistic. But people talk about, oh, if you like Darkspire, you might like this. Darkspire has the Atlas. So I'm looking now, and it's not as expensive. Okay, I can buy this game for $120 complete, right? But there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There is scrolling. There's available complete in box ones. So many of them.
I think people see Atlas and they're like, oh, I know this is worth money, so I'm going to pick it up and try to resell it.
Yes.
This is such like even the cover, like you would just like, if you're digging through shit at a flea market and you didn't know what you're looking for, you'd flip right over this. Like, it's so inconspicuous. And the fact that the dev doesn't have a lot of like, unless you're a huge My Singing Monster fan.
So, I'm putting this on my watch list, actually. Darkspire is comparable, but there's so many of them available. It's got the Atlas the big old A on it. So even this one being more expensive and less known, it's a very specific person buying this.
See the cart for Dark Spiral a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
Same.
So
Not this.
nope.
Not even like high-end retailers. I don't see this game.
It's a ghost, man.
Worth it.
Yep.
Stamp it.
I'm even
triple stamp
the
it.
more we talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah. Honestly.
Buy it while it's not
Which
hot.
is funny because kind of going in, I was like, oh, there's no way this game's going to be worth $200. This is crazy. But the more we're sitting here talking about it, I'm like, yeah, this is a definite yes for me. Like, I'll stamp it.
Triple
wax stamp.
Collecti-Bros stamp.
All right.
You say
Worth
yeah?
it.
I'll say yeah.
Well, look at that.
Do I want to spend that much money? No.
That's my thing. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I think the upside, I'm a little bit of gambling, Like, I think this is a safer gamble. You're not going to lose money if you pay high for it. You're going to lose a couple bucks maybe if it fluctuates, but it's not going to go down 30, 50
back down
bucks.
to $50.
No.
Ever. You won't tank $200 like Albert Odyssey,
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think that one's down 150 or something like that.
Ooh.
Yeah. So you're not going to take a loss like that with this game.
It's a safe buy. It really is.
But that's all for this episode. Next episode, because of the mix-up, I'm also doing it. But it's going to be a Super Nintendo special, which we will also have a guest for. First guest episode.
First guess.
Yeah, so check that out. Super Nintendo. What?
Technically second.
That's true. A second guest, but
That's true,
but
yeah.
first guest for a topic
Not
episode.
going to overlook
That's
the homie like that.
Yeah,
bro.
that's
Come on.
true. That's
Came in
true.
clutch.
A fellow creator.
There we go.
A fellow creator. First one. So
Very
check that
excited
out.
for that.
Yeah, check that one out. We're gonna go over pretty much just like the last two. I love the special episodes, going over what we played, what the best titles are.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are fun. So Super Nintendo is a big one.
It's a very big one. A lot of people say it's the best console of all time.
Yes, and it is a timepiece, I will say. So check that one out. Until then, stay oppressed.
So, adieu.
Check us out on Discord. Tell us what you think, if you want to buy this game or not. Bye!